Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. My name is Mike Gaudette. Today I wanted to address a question that I get asked about a lot from some of my students and from some fellow jazz musicians. A common question that a lot of people will ask me is, in your formative years when you were really practicing a lot and developing your craft, what were some of the books that you would work, and practice out of? And I've always been the type of person that has a very curious mind. I'm always looking for new knowledge. So I developed a pretty extensive music book collection. So I figured it would be cool just to make a video where I walk you through all of the different books that I've practiced out of over the years. Obviously, some I've used more than others, and we'll get into each of them individually. But the majority of the books that I'm going to be covering were books that I spent a lot of time on when I was in college from 2009 to 2013. And these aren't necessarily books that I spend a ton of time on now at this point in my life, but I still love to go back to them and reiterate different things that I've learned over the years and see if I can pick up on any new knowledge. But yeah, so I've got a big pile of books over here. I'm going to take you through them one at a time. So this was a really helpful book for me. This is Barry Galbraith, Daily Exercises in the Melodic and Harmonic Minor Modes. And this just consists of a bunch of different etudes designed to get you, getting really familiar and comfortable with your harmonic and melodic minor fingerings in all different positions on the neck. It's a pretty complicated book, but when I was in college trying to get more and more comfortable with those scales, this book was very helpful in that regard. So next, we have another Barry Galbraith book titled Guitar Comping. And this one is basically just a bunch of different comping etudes over a variety of different jazz standards. And it's really helpful for developing chord voicings on the top four strings, as well as giving you some ideas for chords with walking bass patterns. And yeah, so this book was also very helpful in my formative jazz years. Barry Galbraith is an incredible guitar player. If you haven't checked him out before, definitely look into him. He's pretty underrated and very great as a teacher as well. All right, when it comes to sight reading, this is the best book that I've ever worked out of. This is called Sight Reading for the Contemporary Guitarist by Tom Bruner, I believe. Yeah, Tom Bruner. And my teacher in college, who was Chris Morrison, an absolutely incredible guitarist. Definitely look him up if you haven't heard of him. But he turned me on to this book, and this was a game changer for my sight reading because it's not one of those sight reading books where you're reading these melodies where you can kind of predict what's going to happen after a certain point just by using your ear. Everything in this book is completely atonal, and they very purposely try to make it as difficult as possible. The way the book works is it basically takes you through all of the different positions of the guitar and just writes these atonal etudes in each position, trying to do everything they can to throw you off, throwing in, like B sharps and E sharps or F flats, stuff like that. So anything to get you outside of your comfort zone. And for any guitar player who is really serious about getting their sight reading better, I cannot recommend this book enough. Again, it's Sight Reading for the Contemporary Guitarist by Tom Bruner. Okay, this next one I didn't spend a ton of time with, but this is called the Aguado Studies for Classical Guitar. It's got 24 studies or etudes in them. And when I was in college, I took 2 semesters of classical guitar, and this was one of the books that we worked out of, and I thought it was really helpful. I'm not a super extensive classical guitar player, but I could see how a book like this would be very beneficial for somebody who already knows how to play a little bit, but wants to familiarize themselves more with classical guitar. Obviously you want to have some note reading under your belt before you get into a book like this, but I thought this was a very helpful book for developing, some different patterns within the right hand and just familiarizing yourself to the differences between jazz guitar and classical guitar. All right, this is actually a book that I worked on way back in 2004 with my very first teacher. And this is a book by Sal Salvador, who is considered a legendary guitar teacher to come out of Connecticut. That's where I live. And he's dead now. He's been dead since 1999, I believe. But he was one of the original guitar teachers that everybody went to in Connecticut. A lot of the jazz greats studied from him. But this is a book called Single String Studies for Guitar. It's been so long since I've gone through this that I barely remember a lot of it, but I really should take a look, back at it, especially now that I know how big of a deal Sal Salvador is, because back when I was taking lessons when I was 14, I had no idea who that was, and I wasn't into jazz at that point either. So I feel like I didn't appreciate this as much as I should have, but this would definitely be one that I should go back and revisit. So that's Single String Studies for Guitar by Sal Salvador. All right, this is one that I really liked when I was in high school. So before I got into jazz, I was really into shred guitar and metal and stuff like that. And this is actually a really incredible book called Shred Is Not Dead by Terry Searick, who is this absolutely insane shred guitarist. I actually did an interview with him on my channel. If you're interested, you can check that out. But this is a book that he wrote that I purchased when I went to a guitar camp that he taught at called National Guitar Workshop. And for a shred guitar book, this is really kind of exceptional stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here that's very out of the ordinary for a typical shred guitar player. Lots of exotic arpeggios and, Japanese pentatonic scales, and talking about superimposing different scales and arpeggios onto different chords, which is very much more of a jazzy sort of technique for improvisation. So this is a really incredible book. It's probably kind of hard to find, but you might be able to see it on Amazon. But for shred guitar players out there, I would definitely check this book out and check out Terry Searick. He is definitely one of the scariest shred guitar players I've ever heard, and I don't say that lightly. I think if you check him out, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, next I've got Alan Holdsworth, Just for the Curious. This I believe it came along with an REH instructional video that he did that I had on VHS tape. And this is basically transcriptions of everything that he performed in that video. And Alan Holdsworth is such a freak of nature that I can't honestly say that I got a ton out of this book, because so much of the stuff that he plays is just almost impossible for a normal guitar player like myself. But, I would sort of skim through this and see if I could find little bits of things here and there that I could play. But I haven't spent a ton of time with this book, but I figured, being such a huge Holdsworth fan, it was worth having around just in case if I saw something that piqued my curiosity and, got something new out of it. All right, next we have Giant Steps by Joe DiOrio. This is an incredible book, especially for anybody who is looking to get some more devices for improvising around the John Coltrane song Giant Steps. And this book is just a bunch of different etudes that he writes, line studies, solos over the chord changes to giant steps. And it's got, some stuff that's a little bit more inside and then some stuff that's more outside. And it just gives you a whole set of new devices for kind of maneuvering around the very complicated set of chord changes that is giant steps. I got a lot out of this book. Another Joe DiOrio book that was really helpful is Jazz Structures for the New Millennium. This is a very modern type of book, a lot of intervallic stuff, a lot of fourths and fifths patterns, which Joe DiOrio is known for. And just taking different chord qualities, showing you some more intervallic and spread ways of playing over those chord changes, and also showing you how to superimpose them over additional chords. So this was also a very helpful book to me. This is another Joe DiOrio book titled Intervallic Designs for Jazz Guitar, and I would say it's very similar to the previous book that we just mentioned. A lot of, very intervallic sorts of patterns and, utilizing them over a variety of different chord changes. So, all of the Joe DiOrio intervallic stuff was very beneficial and really great stuff for breaking out of, a lot of the more cliche types of jazz vocabulary, which I think Joe is a master of. All right, this is George Van Epp's Guitar Solos. It's a bunch of transcriptions of George Van Epp's solo guitar work, which is absolutely amazing. If you haven't checked out George Van Epp's, I think he's one of the best in terms of, solo guitar playing and chord melodies. I think he's one of the best guitar players to ever live for that style of playing. And I got a lot out of this book as well. And, a lot of times with books like these, when you're learning somebody's original compositions, for me, it's more about just finding little bits of, chord movements or voice leading ideas, just little things that I can latch onto and have it come out in my own playing, whether I'm playing over a standard or if I'm writing and utilizing it in some way. But this book is filled with so much beautiful, different harmonic movements and chord melody stuff for the guitar. So a great book. Okay, this book was hugely influential in my chordal playing. This is Modern Chords by Vic Juris. And this book was really a game changer, because what he does in this book is he takes different intervallic combinations and he shows you that you can just take these patterns and run them up and down scales. And when you do that, you open yourself up to an entire new world of chord voicings that you hadn't been exposed to before. And, of all of the chord books that I've done, I would say this was probably the one where it really opened my eyes the most and got me playing a lot of new chord stuff that I had never even considered before. So this is a very good book, Modern Chords by Vic Juris. All right, another Vic Juris book. This one is called Inside Outside, and this is basically a bunch of line studies over different jazz standards, with some of them being a little bit more, traditional, and some of them going a little bit more outside, hence the title. But I didn't spend a ton of time with this book, but I definitely got a couple of cool licks and little devices out of this as well. Okay, these next two books are by Ralph Towner, who is an absolutely incredible nylon string player for the ECM record label. And this is Solo Guitar Works Volume 1, and it's just a bunch of transcriptions of his solo guitar music, which is absolutely beautiful. Definitely check it out if you haven't. It sort of exists on this in-between, kind of a fusion of classical and jazz. The harmonic movements are much more kind of like modern jazz types of harmonies, but, doing it with a nylon string guitar, it does have somewhat of a classical sort of effect to it as well, but there are so many beautiful pieces in this, and I got a lot of cool modern chord voicings from this book as well. Then this book is the same thing, but volume 2, so same thing that I just discussed, but just with other Ralph Towner songs, another book that's well worth having for any Ralph Towner fans. Okay, this next one is Villalobos Collected Works for Solo Guitar. This was another book that I worked out of a little bit when I was doing classical guitar in college, but I didn't do a ton of it, but I remember the stuff that I did do in this was very enjoyable. Okay, next we have the Sonatas and Partitas for Violin by Bach. This was one of the first books that my teacher had me get when I got to college. Really great exercises for your right hand for alternate picking and for working out some arpeggio lines and stuff with some more unorthodox fingering. So this was actually very, very beneficial in terms of technique and also in terms of just getting more and more comfortable utilizing a lot of different left-hand fingerings that might not be as commonly laid out on the guitar as you would normally think. So this is a great book. This is actually one of the books where I still work out of to this day. All right, now when it comes to rhythm reading, I think this is about as good as it gets for rhythm reading. This is called Modern Reading in 4/4 Text by Louis Belson. This was another one that I worked out of in college, and this book basically just gives you every different possible rhythmic variation that you can encounter, starting out more simple with eighth notes and quarter notes, and then introducing rests, triplets, ties, basically every single device that you would encounter in a rhythm reading circumstance. So if you're looking to get better at your rhythm reading, I think this book is as good as it gets, and I use this with my students to this day. All right, next we have Expansions by Gary Campbell, a very cool book for expanding your sense of jazz harmony as well as some more modern devices for improvisation. A really great book for somebody who is like intermediate to advanced, who really wants to bring their playing to the next level and get some more devices to start exploring. Great book for that. So Expansions by Gary Campbell. All right, this is an incredible chord book. This is Harmonic Mechanisms for Guitar Volume 1 by George Van Epps. This is about as extensive as it can get when it comes to chordal stuff on the guitar. I mean, look at how thick this is. And believe it or not, he has 3 volumes of this book, I believe, and I've barely scratched the surface with this. I would say maybe I've gone through like 50 to 70 pages of this, but the amount of information just all over the neck, everything you possibly need to know with chords when it comes to chord scales with triads and seventh chords, every possible inversion, every way of grouping major and minor chords together, and the other additional triads, and just an insane book. This book can keep you busy for the rest of your life. That's Harmonic Mechanisms for Guitar Volume 1 by George Van Epps. Okay, another great one, The Augmented Scale in Jazz by, Walt Weisskopf and Ramon Ricker. This was when I had started getting interested in the augmented scale, so I typed in augmented scale on Amazon one day, and this was the only book that I was able to find initially talking about the augmented scale. So it's just a very in-depth look at that scale and its different uses, and historically, like what songs have used it, and just a very good book for anybody who's looking to get more into the augmented scale. All right, this is an amazing solo guitar book. It's the Bill Evans Guitar Book by Sid Jacobs, where he takes different original compositions by Bill Evans and does solo guitar arrangements of them. There are so many incredible chord voicings that you can get out of this. So the way I would do a lot of this book was I would learn the songs, and then I would kind of go through and I'd circle all my favorite individual voicings, and I learned a lot of new chord voicings through this book. This is an incredible book. All right, next we have probably the most extensive improvisation book out there, The Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns by Slonimsky. This is a very mathematical book where it basically just breaks the octave down in every possible way and shows you just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patterns that can be played by dividing the octave up into different intervals. And I did a good amount out of this book, but it's so extensive and kind of overwhelming that it can be pretty hard to know where to start. And I always wish that there had been like recordings of all of the patterns on this, because it'd be so much easier to hear them and then just go and, learn the ones that you like. But if you're interested in, expanding your improvisation and getting some more modern patterns under your fingers, I think this book can keep you busy for the rest of your life. This is the Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns by Slonimsky. All right, now the next one, I've got the Charlie Parker Omni book. This was a game changer for articulation and phrasing, and I did, a good amount of solos, maybe 10 to 15 solos out of this book, the ones that obviously that can be played on the guitar, and it really showed me different ways of articulating notes to sound them more like a sax player, and where to slur, where to pick notes. And I would highly recommend this to anybody who's exploring jazz improvisation. This is an incredible book. All right, and these last two are ones that I've gotten more recently, but it's more just kind of for my own curiosity. I'll skim through them and I'll try to pick up little ideas here and there, but there's a variety of different Omni books that have been released over the years. It used to only be Charlie Parker, but we've gotten a lot more, and the two others that I have picked up is the John Coltrane Omni book and the Oscar Peterson Omni book, which is obviously not completely playable on the guitar, but I like to skim through and see if I could pick up on a couple of lines or a couple of chord voicings here and there, and same thing with the Coltrane one, just skimming through the solos, circling some lines that I like, and trying to play them on the guitar. So there are a lot of others that I still have. I think they're at my parents' house. I have tons and tons of books, but these were the ones that stuck with me over the years that I still try to go through every once in a while when I have the time. But yeah, that's my collection of music books. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear in the comments what books you like to work out of and which ones were really important to you in your development of your jazz playing. So that's the video for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.